My husband said he'd work late, but when I tracked his GPS, I almost passed out. It wasn't a gasp or a cry. It was a silence. The kind of silence that falls just before the lightning strikes, when the air becomes heavy and electric. My hand, holding the telephone, felt impossibly heavy. The little blue dot on the screen, it just pulsed, throbbed really, like a living, breathing accusation. He wasn't at the office. The tall glass building downtown, where he was supposedly crunching the numbers on the big Reynolds account, that building was 5 miles to the west. No, the blue dot was stationary. It was sitting precisely on the small, unassuming square of land that held my younger sister's cottage, Eleanor's house. I looked at the address on the screen, 1412 Willow Creek Lane, and my vision blurred just for a moment. The world became very small, just the glowing screen and the roaring in my ears. I felt a dizziness, a strange floating sensation, as if the floor had gently given way. I had to reach out and place my free hand flat on the cool marble of the kitchen island just to anchor myself. "Working late, my love?" His text message from 3 hours ago had read, "This Reynolds pitch is a monster. Don't wait up." My love. It's strange how a word, a simple, sweet word you've heard for 25 years, can suddenly feel like a shard of glass. I must be honest, I didn't track his location out of the blue. You don't live with a person for a quarter of a century without learning the texture of their silences, the cadence of their evasions. It hadn't been one big thing. It had been 1,000 little paper cuts. The phone angled away from me on the counter. The sudden, brief business dinners that he used to loathe. The way he'd complimented my sister, Eleanor, at our last family barbecue. A little too long, a little too specific. "That dress, Ellie," he'd said, "you make it look like $1,000,000. I'd brushed it off then. Of course I did. He was Arthur, my Arthur. Steady, reliable, perhaps a bit boring, but mine. And she was Eleanor, my baby sister, who I had practically raised after our mother passed. The idea was, well, it was unthinkable. It's a funny thing, intuition. It whispers, and you tell it to be quiet. It nudges, and you turn away. But eventually, it simply screams. Tonight, it had screamed. The irony, the deep, bitter irony, was that he was the one who insisted we all share our locations on the family app. For safety, Clara, he'd said, all paternal and firm, after our son, Mark, went off to college, so we always know everyone is all right. I suppose, in a way, I was finding out if everyone was all right. I stood there in our large, quiet kitchen, the kitchen he had designed, with its gleaming steel and dark wood. It felt cold, impersonal, like a stage set for a life that was, perhaps, not entirely real. My mind tried to find excuses. Of course it did. The mind is a loyal friend, desperate to protect the heart. Maybe his car broke down there. Maybe Eleanor is sick. Maybe he just stopped by to fix her leaky faucet. But it was 11:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. I picked up the phone. My fingers felt numb, detached, as I dialed his number. I listened to it ring. Once, twice, 3 times, then the click. His voice, warm and professional, filled the silence. "You've reached Arthur Vance. I can't come to the phone right now." I hung up. My thumb hovered over Eleanor's contact photo, her smiling, arm in arm with me at my 50th birthday. I pressed the call button. It didn't even ring, straight to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Ellie. Leave a message and I'll call you right back." The cheerfulness of her voice was a physical blow. I sank onto the kitchen stool. The two people I loved most in this world, besides my son. The two pillars of my life. And they were together, in the dark, while I was here, in this bright, empty kitchen, waiting. I didn't cry. Tears were not the first response. It was something else, a cold, sharp clarity. It settled over me like a shroud. I saw all the little moments of the past 6 months rearrange themselves, like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. The sudden shared interest in hiking, the text message he thought I hadn't seen, can't wait, the way Eleanor had stopped asking me for advice, stopped calling just to chat. It was all there. I had just refused to see it. I sat there for a long time. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed midnight. Then it chimed 1 a.m. I just sat. I thought about our life. Our son, Mark, just starting his new job, so proud of his father. I thought about the company we had built. I thought about the vows we had taken in that little church with the ivy, in sickness and in health. He'd held my hand so tightly that day. His hands had been so warm. At 2:15 a.m., I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. I didn't move. I heard the garage door rumble open and closed, the key in the side door, the soft click as it shut. He padded into the kitchen, his posture one of exaggerated exhaustion. He stopped, startled, when he saw me sitting in the dim light. "Clara, my goodness, you scared me. Why are you still up?" I just looked at him. I studied his face, his handsome face, now lined with middle age, his silvering hair slightly mussed. "The Reynolds account," I said. My voice sounded strange, distant. He nodded, running a hand over his face. Oh, it was a nightmare, just a total bear. We must have run the projections 20 times. I'm utterly spent. He came closer, leaning in to kiss my forehead. I didn't flinch, but I didn't lean in either. I just existed. He paused, his lips a half-inch from my skin. He must have sensed the ice. And that's when I smelled it. It wasn't a cheap perfume. It was something far more intimate. It was the faint, sweet smell of Eleanor's shampoo, the lavender and chamomile one she always used, and underneath that, the unmistakable, smoky scent of the pine logs she always burned in her fireplace. He was a good liar, but not a perfect one. He pulled back, his eyes searching mine, a flicker of, was it panic? "Are you all right, Clara?" he asked, his voice now laced with a false-sounding concern. I looked at the man I had loved since I was 20 years old, the man I had trusted with my heart, my future, and my family, and I felt nothing, just a vast, cold emptiness. I gave him the smallest smile. "I'm just tired, Arthur. You must be too." I stood up, walked past him, and went upstairs to the guest room. I locked the door, and as I sat on the edge of the bed, the betrayal finally settled in, not as a storm, but as a quiet, suffocating fog. He thought I was a fool. He thought I was just a simple, trusting wife. He thought I was weak. He had forgotten who I really was. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The guest room bed was comfortable, Egyptian cotton sheets, a firm mattress, but it felt like a raft drifting in the middle of a cold, dark ocean. I lay there staring at the ceiling, watching the shadows of the oak tree outside dance across the plaster like long, grasping fingers. You might think I spent those hours plotting revenge or crying into the pillow. I did shed a few tears, I'll admit. The heart breaks in stages, you see. First, it cracks, then it shatters, and finally, it turns into dust. That night, I was in the cracking stage, but mostly, I lay there thinking about history, our history, and the colossal, tragic misunderstanding that was Arthur's life. You see, my husband suffers from a very common affliction among self-made men. He believes he actually made himself. Arthur walks through the world with the heavy stride of a captain of industry. He wears Italian suits that cost more than my father's first car. He speaks to waiters with that specific tone of polite condescension that says, "I am important." At dinner parties, he loves to tell the story of how he built Vance & Associates from the ground up. "I started with a desk and a telephone in a basement," he likes to say, swirling his scotch, "just grit and determination." I always smile when he tells that story. I nod and pat his hand. I let him be the hero. But here is the secret, the truth that has gathered dust in a safe deposit box at the First National Bank for 25 years. Arthur didn't build Vance & Associates. I did. Or, to be more precise, my great-uncle Silas did. When Arthur and I met, he was charming, ambitious, and penniless. He had big dreams and empty pockets. I, on the other hand, was the quiet librarian with a sensible wardrobe. What Arthur didn't know, what no one really knew, because my family was raised to believe that discussing money was the height of vulgarity, was that I was the sole beneficiary of Uncle Silas's estate. Silas was a curmudgeon. He hated the government, he hated taxes, and he hated show-offs. He made his fortune in copper mining and aggressive patent acquisitions. When he passed, he left it all to me, his sensible Clara, with one condition: don't let some fool man spend it on fast cars and slow horses. So, when Arthur came to me, eyes shining, talking about this consulting firm he wanted to start, I made a choice. I loved him. I wanted him to feel strong. I wanted him to be the provider he so desperately needed to be. I went to my family lawyer, old Mr. Henderson. We set up a holding company, a shell corporation, really, innocuously named Blue Heron Trust. Blue Heron Trust provided the startup capital for Vance & Associates. It provided the funds for the expansion. It bought the building downtown that Arthur is so proud of. And in exchange, Blue Heron Trust holds a 60% controlling interest in the company. Arthur signed the papers. Oh, he signed them. But he was so eager to get the check, so blinded by the zeros on the bank draft, that he didn't read the fine print. He thought Blue Heron was just some silent angel investor I had found through a friend of a friend. He treated it like a bank loan that never needed to be repaid. He forgot about Blue Heron. Over the years, as the dividends came in and he reinvested them, he began to believe his own myth. He forgot that he is, technically speaking, a minority shareholder. And it wasn't just the company. The house we live in, the deed is in my name. My father insisted on that before he gave us the land. The beach house in the Hamptons, where he undoubtedly plans to take Eleanor next summer, inherited from my mother. Even the Porsche he drives, the lease is under the corporate account, my corporate account. Lying there in the dark, the irony washed over me so thick I could taste it. It was bitter, like old coffee. Arthur was risking everything: his marriage, his reputation, his relationship with our son, for a fling with my sister. He was strutting around thinking he was the king of the castle, preparing to trade in his old wife for a newer model. He probably thought that if we divorced, he would have to pay me alimony. He probably worried about splitting his pension. He had no idea that if I snapped my fingers, the ground beneath his feet would simply vanish. He would be left with nothing but his suits and his ego. I could have ended it right then. I could have marched into the master bedroom, turned on the lights, and thrown the legal documents in his face. I could have called Mr. Henderson and told him to freeze the corporate assets. I could have locked him out of the building by sunrise. But as I stared at the ceiling, a cold resolve settled in my stomach. It replaced the heartbreak. It wasn't enough to just take it away. If I stripped him of everything now, he would play the victim. He would tell everyone I was a vindictive shrew who blindsided him. He would run to Eleanor, and they would cry together about how cruel I was, and she would comfort him, and they would start over, fueled by their shared hatred of me. No, that wouldn't do. He needed to understand. He needed to feel the weight of his choices. He needed to realize that his arrogance was a balloon and I was the one holding the pin. And Eleanor, my own flesh and blood, she needed to learn that loyalty isn't just a word you stitch onto a throw pillow. I decided then and there that I wouldn't reveal my hand. Not yet. I would let him think he was getting away with it. I would let him think he was the smart one. I would play the role he had assigned to me, the oblivious, aging housewife, the victim. I would let him build his tower of lies higher and higher, brick by brick, because the higher the tower, the more spectacular the collapse. I rolled over and pulled the duvet up to my chin. I closed my eyes, visualizing the safe deposit box, key number 402. "Enjoy your secret, Arthur," I whispered into the darkness. "Because I'm certainly going to enjoy mine." I drifted into a light, fitful sleep, dreaming of blue herons and crumbling castles. The game had begun, and he didn't even know he was playing. The next morning, I unlocked the guest room door at 7 a.m., just as I always did. I put on my silk robe, the one he'd bought me for our 20th anniversary, and padded downstairs to make the coffee. Routine, you see, is a wonderful shield. It's a suit of armor you can wear when your insides have turned to glass. Arthur was already in the kitchen, dressed in his suit, knotting his tie. He looked relieved. He'd probably spent the night expecting a storm, a hurricane of tears and accusations. When he got silence instead, he mistook it for surrender. "Clara, darling," he said, forcing a note of gentle concern into his voice. "You're up. I was worried about you, locking yourself in like that. Are you feeling unwell?" I turned from the coffee grinder, letting the beans clatter into the machine. I made myself look at him. I allowed my eyes to be watery. I allowed my shoulders to slump. I let him see the performance he expected. "I'm just tired, Arthur," I whispered. My voice was a little hoarse, which was a helpful, genuine touch. I think I'm just feeling a bit low, run down. You know how it gets in the spring." He visibly relaxed. His shoulders, which had been tense around his ears, dropped. He came over and put his hands on my arms, rubbing them in that paternal way he'd adopted. Of course," he said, almost cooing. "You've been overdoing it with the garden. You need to rest, my love. Why don't you take it easy today? Maybe call Ellie. A little sister time might cheer you up." The casual, cruel brilliance of that suggestion. It was like a needle to the heart. He was testing me, seeing how far he could push the lie. I flinched, a tiny, believable recoil. "Oh, I don't know. I think I just want to be quiet today. Maybe I'll just read." "Whatever you need," he said, kissing my forehead. That same forehead he tried to kiss last night. This time, I let him. His lips felt cold, like a stone. "I have to run. Big day. The Reynolds deal is, well, it's just a lot." "Of course," I said. "Work hard." I watched him walk out, his briefcase swinging. The arrogance was already settling on him, a fine, glittering dust. He thought I was weak. He thought I was breaking. He had no idea I was forging. The days that followed were the hardest of my life. I lived a phantom existence. I smiled at our son, Mark, during our weekly video calls, telling him everything was wonderful. "Dad's just busy," I'd say. "You know how he is." Meanwhile, I was living with two strangers. Arthur became buoyant. He started humming in the mornings. He bought a new, ridiculously red sports car. Just a little midlife fun, darling, using the corporate account, of course. He was careless, sloppy. He'd leave his phone on the counter, and I'd see Eleanor's name pop up. Just checking in, or can't stop thinking about. He started criticizing me, gently at first. Clara, that old cardigan, it's so drab. Why don't you buy something new? Or, are you sure you want that second helping of pasta? We're not getting any younger, are we? He was rewriting our history in real time. I was no longer his partner. I was a burden he was kindly, patiently shouldering. He was the vital, powerful man, and I was the fading, sexless wife he had to manage. I let him believe it. I would just look at him with sad, tired eyes and say, "You're right, Arthur. I'm sorry. I'll try to do better." And Eleanor, that was a different kind of pain. She came over a week later, bearing a lemon meringue pie, her apology for being so distant. She couldn't look me in the eye. "Clara, hi," she chirped, her voice 2 notes too high. "I feel like I haven't seen you in ages. How are you? You look tired." I held the screen door open for her, my heart a cold, heavy lump in my chest. This was the girl I had taught to ride a bicycle, the one whose tears I had dried after her first breakup. "I haven't been sleeping well, Ellie," I said, letting her see the dark circles under my eyes. They weren't hard to fake. "Oh, you poor thing," she said, bustling into my kitchen, and setting the pie down. "Well, you just sit. I'll make us some tea. We need a good, long chat." The chat was a masterpiece of self-deception. She talked about a new yoga class. She talked about the terrible dating scene. And then she started talking about Arthur. "Arthur seems stressed, doesn't he?" she said, studying her fingernails. "I ran into him at the coffee shop last week, and he just seemed so burdened. I worry about him, Clara. You're so lucky to have him. But I just wonder if you fully appreciate what a dynamic man he is." I felt the sting of tears then, hot and sharp, not of sadness, of rage, the audacity, the sheer blinding audacity. She was sitting in my house, drinking my tea, telling me to appreciate the man she was sleeping with. I manufactured a watery smile. "He is wonderful. He works so hard for all of us." "Exactly," she said, relieved. "He deserves to be happy, you know?" He deserves to be happy. The words hung in the air. The subtext was clear, and you are not making him happy. But I am. I was the victim. I was the poor, drab, oblivious wife, and they were the vibrant, misunderstood soulmates. I let them have their story. While they were busy congratulating themselves, I was busy being quiet. I was quiet when I checked the corporate credit card statements online, noting the hotel charges at the Willow Inn, a boutique inn just outside of town. I was quiet when I saw the receipts for jewelry, a diamond tennis bracelet I had not received. I was quiet when I overheard Arthur on the phone in his study, his voice low and intimate. "Just be patient, my love. I'm handling it. She's fragile. We have to do this right." Handling it. He was handling me. While he was handling it, I made a phone call. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice calm and low. "It's Clara Vance." "Clara, my dear, what a pleasure. How are you?" "I'm well, thank you," I lied. I was just reviewing some old paperwork, and it's made me realize I need to get my affairs in order. For Mark's sake, you understand. I'd like to update my will, and I'd like to do a full review of the Blue Heron Trust, just to make sure everything is tidy." "A very prudent move, Clara," he said. "Of course. When would you like to come in?" "Would next Tuesday be possible? And, Mr. Henderson, let's keep this just between us. Arthur has so much on his plate with the Reynolds account, I don't want to bother him with boring old paperwork." "Understood," he said, his voice sharp with the discretion of a 50-year legal career. "Your confidence is, as always, assured." I hung up the phone. I looked at the receipt for the tennis bracelet I'd printed from the computer. I folded it, neat and tidy, and tucked it into my pocket. My suffering was real. Every careless laugh, every whispered phone call, every condescending pat on the head, it was a death by 1,000 cuts. But I was not just a victim. I was an observer. I was a witness. And I was keeping meticulous records. The next few weeks were a performance. I played the part of the devoted, fragile wife to perfection. I made his favorite meals. I asked about his hard day at the office. I listened, my face a mask of gentle concern, as he spun elaborate fallacies about meetings and projections. He'd pat my hand and say, "Don't you worry your pretty little head about it, Clara. It's all very complicated." I would just nod and smile. "Of course, dear. I know you'll handle it. You always do." This, it turned out, was exactly what he wanted to hear. My apparent helplessness fed his ego like kindling to a fire. The more fragile I acted, the more infallible he became in his own mind. He was Arthur Vance, the master of the universe. He was juggling a major business deal, a passionate new love, and a dim-witted wife. He thought he was a genius. But it's a difficult thing to be a genius in 3 places at once. Something eventually has to be dropped. The first tremor came not from my lawyer, but from the Reynolds account, the monster he was supposedly taming. I was in the conservatory, pruning my hydrangeas, when he took the call in his study. He must have thought I was out of earshot. He didn't close the door all the way. At first, his voice was the one I knew well, the smooth, confident baritone. "John, good to hear from you. Yes, absolutely, we're on track." Then, a long silence. I stopped clipping. I could hear the faint, angry squawk of the voice on the other end of the line. Then Arthur spoke again, but it wasn't Arthur. It was a different man. His voice was high, thin. "What? No, that can't be right. I sent the revised figures just last. No, wait, that was the internal. John, listen to me. There must be a misunderstanding. John? John?" I heard him slam the receiver down, a thud, then a sharp, guttural curse that rattled the crystal decanter on his desk. I waited a full minute, clipping a deadhead from a blossom. Then I walked slowly to the study. I pushed the door open. He was standing by the window, his back to me, his hands braced on the mahogany desk. His knuckles were white. "Arthur," I said, my voice all soft and watery, "is everything all right, dear? You sounded upset." He spun around and his face was a frightening thing. It was pale, blotchy with rage. "Everything," he snapped, "is fine, Clara, just fine. It's just a stupid clerical error. Someone in accounting. Someone's going to be fired." "Oh dear," I said, wringing my hands. "Not the Reynolds account, I hope?" He looked at me, his eyes wide with a kind of shocked fury. "What do you know about the Reynolds account?" "Only what you've told me," I said, shrinking back, as if he'd raised his hand. "That it was a monster. That's all. I'm sorry. I'll leave you to it." I fled. I hurried back to the kitchen, my heart pounding a strange, cold rhythm. He hadn't just made a clerical error. I knew his tell. When he blames accounting, it means he missed a deadline. When he blames a junior associate, it means he got the numbers wrong. He had been too busy. He had been working late at 1412 Willow Creek Lane. He had been crunching the numbers with my sister at the Willow's Inn. And while he was playing the lover, he had fumbled the single biggest client his company had courted in a decade. The cracks, once they appeared, began to spread. Eleanor, my dear sister, was no help to him. She had fully embraced her role as the soon-to-be mistress of the Vance fortune. She had, I discovered, quit her job as a pediatric nurse. The stress was just too much, she'd told me, not a hint of shame in her voice. She was also spending. The diamond tennis bracelet made its debut at, of all places, our son Mark's 23rd birthday dinner. Mark was home for the weekend, a rare treat. We were all at Spago, Arthur's favorite place to be seen. Eleanor arrived, late, wearing a new silk dress that was cut a little too low, and on her wrist, glittering under the restaurant lights, was the bracelet, the one from the receipt I had tucked away. She made a show of it. She kept resting her chin on her hand, her left hand, so the bracelet caught the light. She'd accidentally let her sleeve ride up as she reached for the wine. She saw me looking at it. I watched her eyes. She looked at the diamonds. Then she looked at me, a quick, triumphant little glance. I could feel Mark's confusion. "Wow, Aunt Ellie," he said, trying to be polite. "That's some serious hardware. Did you win the lottery?" Eleanor laughed, that high, airy laugh she'd developed. "Oh, this old thing," she said, stroking it. "I just have a very, very generous new friend, someone who finally appreciates me." I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at Arthur. He was staring at his water glass, his jaw tight. He was furious. Not at her, I realized, but at her indiscretion. She was getting sloppy. She was breaking the rules of their little game. The dinner was excruciating. Arthur was sullen, drinking his scotch too fast. Eleanor was giddy, preening. And I just sat there, the poor drab wife, pushing a piece of sea bass around my plate, the very picture of oblivious misery. That night, they had a fight. I heard him in the driveway. He was on his car's Bluetooth, and his voice carried in the still night air. "Insane? Wearing it in front of my son? What is wrong with you, Ellie?" Her voice was a tinny shriek from the speaker. "I'm tired of hiding. You said you were handling it. You said she was. Fragile? When? Arthur, when are you going to?" He must have pulled into the garage because the sound cut off. The downfall had begun. It wasn't me. It was them. It was his arrogance, his distraction, his belief that his work was just a machine that would run itself. It was her greed, her impatience, her desperate, tacky need to show the world that she had won. A week later, the final notice came. I knew because I checked the mail, as I always did. There was a registered letter from the board of the Reynolds Corporation. I didn't open it. I left it on the hall table, right on top of a glossy catalog for Vogue. When Arthur came home, he saw it. He froze. He picked it up, his thumb tracing the embossed logo. He looked at me, standing in the living room. "What's this?" he asked, his voice hollow. "It just came, dear," I said. "It looks important." He tore it open. He read the first paragraph, and I watched the color leave his face. He sank onto the little bench by the door. He didn't say a word. He just sat. He had lost them. The account, the millions in future revenue, the prestige. It was gone, and it was his fault. I walked over. I put my hand on his shoulder. He flinched, but he didn't pull away. "Arthur?" I whispered. Is it bad news?" He looked up at me, and for the first time, the arrogance was gone. The condescension was gone. All I saw was a raw, gaping terror. He looked old and small. "Clara," he choked out. I think I've made a terrible mistake." I looked at him, this shell of a man sitting on the hall bench, a single sheet of expensive paper trembling in his hand. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. He was searching for an anchor, and I was the only thing in the room that wasn't spinning. "A mistake?" I repeated, my voice soft. I sat down beside him, but not too close. I didn't touch him. "Arthur, what's happened? You're frightening me." It's the company, Clara," he stammered. He couldn't even say the client's name. "It's gone. The deal, it's all gone. There was a mix-up with the financials, a deadline. He ran his hand over his face, a gesture of pure, abject panic. "I don't know what to do." He was waiting for me to scream, to cry, to blame him. I had, in that moment, a choice. I could have been the wife he deserved. Instead, I was the wife he thought he had. "Oh, Arthur," I said, letting out a long, shaky breath. "Oh, my dear, is that all?" He stared at me, his mouth slightly open. "Is that all? Clara, this is everything. This is our life. The house, the cars, Mark's tuition. It all comes from the company." "It's just money, Arthur," I said gently, reaching out to pat his trembling hand. It was ice cold. "Money comes and money goes. We still have each other, don't we? You're a brilliant man. You built it all from nothing once. You can fix it. We'll just have to tighten our belts, that's all." My response, my quiet, simplistic, almost foolish support, was the one thing he was not prepared for. It broke him. He didn't just weep. He made a high, thin sound, a keen of a man who has looked over the edge and seen the bottom. He slumped forward, his head in his hands, and he sobbed. My kindness, my naivety, was a mirror. In it, he saw his own monstrousness. He was betraying this simple, loyal woman who believed in him. I could almost hear his thoughts. "She doesn't even know. She still loves me. My God, what have I done?" The following month was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. He was right. The Reynolds account wasn't just a client. It was the foundation. He had leveraged the promise of that revenue to fund his expansion, to fund Eleanor. First, the call started. Creditors, the bank, the leasing company for the new red sports car. I would answer the phone, Vance residence, and listen to the angry, professional voices on the other end. I would calmly take a message. "I'm sorry, he's not available. I'll be sure to tell him you called." I would write the messages on little pink memo slips and leave them on his desk. Mr. Henderson, from the bank, not my Mr. Henderson, called. The outstanding line of credit, urgent. Global leasing. The Porsche, final notice. One afternoon, I was weeding the roses when a tow truck pulled into the driveway. Arthur tried to stop them. He ran out in his shirt sleeves, waving his arms, arguing. But the man had the paperwork. I watched from the window as they hooked the gleaming red car, the symbol of his vitality, his affair, and dragged it down the drive, its back wheels leaving 2 black marks on my gravel. Arthur just stood there, his shoulders slumped, watching it go. And then there was Eleanor. As the money evaporated, so did her appreciation. The desperate, loving texts he used to get were replaced by angry, demanding ones. I knew because he'd leave his phone forgotten on the kitchen counter, and the screen would light up. "Where are you? You said you'd transfer the money." "My rent is due, Arthur." My card was declined. At the spa, this is humiliating. He started drinking, not just his evening scotch. He was drinking at 3 p.m. He'd sit in his study, the room where he was handling it, and just stare at the wall, a tumbler in his hand. The end came on a Tuesday. I heard the shouting from the front door. He must have gone to her cottage. She must have followed him home. I stayed in the kitchen, slicing carrots for a soup. "You promised me," she was shrieking. "You said you were leaving her. You said we'd travel. You're a liar, Arthur, a broke, pathetic liar." "Ellie, please, keep your voice down," he was begging. "It's just a temporary setback. I can fix this." "Fix it? You can't even pay for my car. You're ruined, and you tried to ruin me." "I loved you," he roared back, his voice cracking with the desperation of it all. "You loved this." I heard her slap the wall of the house. "You loved that I wasn't her. Well, congratulations, Arthur. You're going to be left with her. The two of you can be poor and drab together." The front door slammed so hard, a picture fell off the wall in the hall. I heard her car peel out of the driveway. I waited 5 minutes. Then I walked into the hall. He was on the floor. He'd slid down the wall, his legs splayed out in front of him. He was the picture of utter desolation. He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed and empty. He had lost his company. He had lost his mistress. He had lost his pride. He was, finally, at rock bottom. "She's gone," he whispered. It wasn't an admission. It was a statement of fact. "I heard," I said quietly. I held out my hand. "Come into the kitchen, Arthur. I've made soup." He stared at my hand as if it were a life raft. He took it, and I helped him to his feet. He was shaking. I sat him at the kitchen table, the one he'd always said was provincial and needed replacing. I put a bowl of simple carrot soup in front of him. He looked at the soup, he looked at me, and he began to confess. "It was all a lie, Clara," he whispered, the tears rolling down his cheeks and dripping into the bowl. "The late nights, the Reynolds account. I was with her. I was with Eleanor." I sat down opposite him. I didn't say anything. I just listened. "For months, I bought her things. The bracelet. I don't know why. She made me feel." "Young?" I offered, my voice flat. "Yes," he choked. "And I destroyed everything. The company is gone. The money is gone. She's gone. And you should leave me. You should take Mark and just go. I have nothing. I am nothing." He had finally said it, the truth. I let the silence sit for a long, heavy moment. I watched him. This was the man who had called me drab. This was the man who was handling me. "I'm not going to leave you, Arthur," I said, my voice calm. He looked up, his eyes wide with a desperate, pathetic hope. "But why? I'm ruined." "We are married," I said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer. Those were the vows. "But we cannot stay here. The bank, the creditors, they're going to take the house." He nodded, defeated. "I know. Of course. I'll pack a bag. I can go to a motel." Don't be ridiculous, I said, almost sharply. We are a family. We will pack. I I have a little money saved, my pin money from my mother. It's not much, but I think I found us a place, a small cottage just outside of town. We can rent it until you get back on your feet. A cottage, he repeated, the word sounding foreign in his mouth. Yes, it's simple, but it's clean. But Arthur, I leaned forward, we will both have to work. I've already found a job, part-time, at the town library. It will cover the rent. A job, he said, dazed. Yes, and I found one for you too. It's not what you're used to. It's at the local nursery, the garden center. They need someone strong for lifting the bags of soil, for stocking. It's all I could find. I watched him. This was the test. The man who wore Italian suits, the man who spoke to waiters. I was asking him to haul dirt for a living. He looked at his hands, soft and manicured. He looked at me, his plain, loyal wife, who had just offered him a lifeline when he deserved nothing. He nodded, a single jerky motion. Yes, he whispered. All right, yes. Thank you, Clara. Thank you. I nodded. Good. We start tomorrow. The lesson had begun. We lived in that cottage for 8 months. 8 months of turning the calendar pages, of watching the seasons change through a small, drafty window. It was a tiny 2-bedroom place with peeling linoleum and taps that dripped with a steady, maddening rhythm. Our lives became small. I would wake before dawn, make coffee on the old gas stove, and pack 2 simple lunches, a cheese sandwich for me, a thermos of soup for him. I would walk to the library, and he would take the sputtering old bus to the Green Thumb nursery on the highway. I watched him. In the beginning, he moved like a ghost. He was haunted by what he had lost. He'd come home, his hands, once so soft, now cracked and stained with soil. He'd sit at the small formica table and eat his dinner in silence. He was, I think, in a state of profound shock. But slowly, something began to change. The silence, which had at first been hollow and empty, became peaceful. He stopped talking about the past. He stopped complaining about the aches in his back. He started noticing things. One evening, I came home from the library, exhausted, my feet aching from standing on the hard floor. He was already home. He was on his knees by the old rusted sink, a wrench in his hand. "Arthur?" I asked, startled. He looked up, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead with a dirty forearm. "The dripping," he said. It was driving me mad. I think I fixed it." He got to his feet, turned the handle, and silence. The drip was gone. He looked at me, and a small, tired smile touched his lips. I watched a video online. It wasn't that hard. It was a small thing, a dripping tap. But the Arthur I knew would have called a plumber and then complained about the bill. This man had knelt on a cold, hard floor and fixed it himself, for us. A few weeks later, I was walking past the nursery on my way to the post office. I saw him. He was in the outdoor section, helping an elderly woman in a wheelchair. She was pointing at a flat of impatiens, and he was listening, really listening, with a patience I had never seen in him. He carefully loaded the flowers onto her cart, checked the wheels on her chair, and then bent down to say something that made her laugh. He thought no one was watching. He wasn't performing. He wasn't trying to impress a client. He was just being kind. I stood there, hidden by a large row of pine trees, and I felt the last cold knot of anger in my heart finally dissolve. The man who had betrayed me, the arrogant, condescending stranger, was gone. This man, I didn't know him yet, but I wanted to. He had learned. He had learned that his value was not in his bank account or his title. He had learned humility, not as a punishment, but as a practice. He had hauled the dirt. He had fixed the tap. He had been kind for kindness' sake. The lesson was over. It was time to go home. That evening, I sat him down at the Formica table. "Arthur," I said, my voice quiet, "I need you to come with me tomorrow. I have an appointment, and I need you to be there." A flicker of the old panic crossed his face. "An appointment? Is it the bank? Are they taking what's left?" "No, Arthur," I said. "It's not the bank. It's just something I have to do at 11 o'clock. He nodded. "All right, Clara, of course. I'll ask Mr. Henderson for the morning off." It took me a moment to realize he meant Mr. Henderson, the nursery owner, not my Mr. Henderson. The next morning, he stood in our small bedroom, holding his one remaining good suit. It hung on him. The 8 months of manual labor had stripped the puffiness from his face and left him lean, wiry. The suit of the captain of industry looked like a costume on this new, simpler man. "Is this all right?" he asked. "It's perfect," I said. We took the bus downtown. He was silent, nervous, his hands clasped between his knees. He clearly expected to be walking into a new level of financial hell. I led him into the lobby of the tallest glass building in the city, the Henderson Building. He stopped, confused. "Clara, this is the HPG Tower." "Yes," I said. "Our appointment is on the top floor." "The top, but that's Henderson, Price and Gable. That's the most expensive law firm in the state. Clara, we can't afford to be in this building." "It's all right, Arthur," I said, taking his arm. "They're expecting us." We were whisked up in a silent, wood-paneled elevator. When the doors opened, a receptionist greeted us. "Mrs. Vance, Mr. Henderson is ready for you." Arthur was pale. He followed me like a man in a dream. We were shown into a vast corner boardroom, the entire city spread out below us. And at the head of the table sat Mr. Henderson, my Mr. Henderson, old, sharp as a tack, and smiling. "Clara, my dear," he said, standing to kiss my hand. "Arthur, it's been a long time." Arthur just stared. "Mr. Henderson, sir, I don't understand. Clara, what is this?" "Please sit down," I said. I sat at the table, and Mr. Henderson slid a large, heavy, leather-bound portfolio in front of me. I looked at my husband. My voice was not the watery, fragile whisper he had known for the past year. It was the voice of the woman who had sat in this boardroom many times before. "Arthur," I began, 8 months ago, you told me you were ruined. You told me you had nothing, that you were nothing. You were wrong. You were never nothing, but you were ruined." "Clara," he whispered, his eyes wide. "You had a story you loved to tell about how you built Vance and Associates from a desk and a telephone. It was a wonderful story, but it wasn't the true one." I opened the portfolio. 25 years ago, I said, an investor gave you the seed money to start your company. You called it a silent angel. Do you remember the name of the trust?" He paled, nodding. "Blue Heron, the Blue Heron Trust. But that was just the start." "It wasn't just the start, Arthur. It was everything." I turned the first page to the Articles of Incorporation. The trust didn't just provide seed money. It provided all the capital for the expansion, for the staff, for the building. In exchange, the trust took a 60% controlling interest in the company. I slid the signature page toward him. He stared at the name, Clara M. Davies Vance, trustee. He breathed. I don't. You? It was my inheritance from my great-uncle Silas. He insisted I protect it. I turned another page. This is the deed to our home, the one you were so afraid the bank would take. They couldn't. It was never mortgaged. My father gave me the land, and the Blue Heron Trust built the house. It has always been solely in my name. I turned another. And this? This is the ownership certificate for the building downtown, the one where Vance and Associates had its offices. You weren't just a tenant, Arthur. You were my tenant. Every rent check you signed was a deposit into my trust. He was looking at me, but he wasn't seeing me. He was seeing a quarter century of a life he had never understood. The cars, he whispered. The beach house. The red Porsche. All of it, I said softly. The company, the houses, the investments. It was never yours to lose, Arthur. It was always mine. He sank back in his chair, his face ashen. The shock was so profound, he couldn't speak. He just looked at me. He was seeing me for the very first time. You let me, he stammered. You let me lose the Reynolds account. You let me work at the nursery. Yes. My voice was not triumphant. It was just true. Why? He choked out. Why would you? Why would you do this? Why not just tell me? I leaned forward. Because the man who had everything was arrogant and cruel and unfaithful. He was willing to destroy his family for nothing. I didn't care about that man. I didn't care if he lost his company or his mistress. I let you lose his life. I paused, letting the words settle in the quiet, expensive air. I needed to know, I said, my voice softer. What was left when all of that was stripped away? I had to see if the man with nothing, the man hauling dirt, the man fixing a leaky tap, the man who was kind to a stranger in a wheelchair. I had to know if that man was someone I could spend the rest of my life with. I had to know which man I was truly married to. He stared at me, the papers forgotten. And in his eyes, I saw not anger, but a slow, dawning, and utterly agonizing understanding. Arthur sat there, frozen in the plush leather chair that, an hour ago, he would have felt he deserved. He didn't look at the papers. He didn't look at Mr. Henderson. He just looked at me. His gaze it was like watching a man piece together a shattered mirror, knowing the reflection would never be the same. You saw, he whispered. You knew. The GPS that first night. Yes, I said. I knew. And Eleanor, the bracelet. I had the receipt, Arthur, from the corporate card. He closed his eyes. A single tear traced a path down his cheek. It wasn't a tear of self-pity. It was a tear of pure, scalding shame. He had been performing a cheap play in a grand theater, thinking he was the star, only to find out the entire audience, the director and the theater owner, was the one person he had relegated to the role of a stagehand. My God, Clara, he breathed, the words catching in his throat. What you must have thought of me. The things I said to you. Drab. I called you drab. He physically recoiled from his own memory. And all that time, you just let me. You let me be that monster. Mr. Henderson, with the impeccable timing of a man who has witnessed a lifetime of human folly, quietly rose. Clara, Arthur, I'll give you the room. The car is waiting downstairs when you are ready, Mrs. Vance. He left, closing the heavy door with a soft, final click. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the sound of Arthur's ragged breathing. He didn't move. He just sat, his hands, those strong, calloused hands that had been hauling bags of peat moss, clenched on the mahogany table. Finally, he spoke, his voice raw. "You had every right," he said, "every right to throw me out, to destroy me. That first night, you could have locked me out, frozen the accounts. It would have been it would have been deserved." "And what would that have taught you, Arthur?" I asked, my voice as quiet as his. "That you were caught? That you'd lost a game of power? You would have run to Eleanor, and you both would have hated me. You would have learned nothing." "But the cottage," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "The library, my job. You arranged all of it. The cottage, that was yours, wasn't it?" "It belonged to my uncle's estate. And yes, Mr. Henderson at the nursery is a distant cousin of my lawyer. He was happy to help. He said you were a good worker." That broke him. He put his head down on his arms and his shoulders shook. It was the deep, silent, agonizing sob of a man who finally understands the full scope, not of his financial ruin, but of his moral one. He wasn't crying because he had been a fool. He was crying because I had been so merciful. How can you even sit here with me?" he choked out. "After what I did? How can you be here?" I waited. I let him cry. I had watched him sob from self-pity in my hallway. This was different. This was remorse. After a long time, he sat up. His face was a ruin, but his eyes were clear. They were the clearest I had seen them in 25 years. What do we do now, Clara?" he asked. It was a simple question. There was no assumption in it. He was a man with no ground beneath his feet, asking for a single, solid place to stand. "We go home, Arthur," I said. The drive back was in a quiet town car, not the bus. I gave the driver the address to our real home. When we pulled up the long gravel drive, past the gardens he had unknowingly paid for, he just stared at the house as if he'd never seen it before. He didn't move to get out of the car. "I can't go in there, Clara," he whispered. I don't belong there, not after." "That house," I said, "is where we live. The cottage was a lesson. This is our life, if you want it." I got out. I walked to the front door and unlocked it. I left it open. I went inside and waited in the hall. He stood by the car for a full 5 minutes. I watched him. He looked at the house, at his suit, at his hands. He took a deep breath and he walked inside. He stopped in front of me, in the hall where he had first collapsed. He looked like a guest, waiting to be told where to put his coat. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me yet," I said. "This isn't a reward, Arthur. This is a choice." "A choice?" "Vance and Associates. The name, the brand you built, it's gone. Losing the Reynolds account was a real blow. The company is, for all intents and purposes, a shell. But the Blue Heron Trust, my uncle's fortune, that is very much intact. It's vast. And for the last 8 months, while I've been working at the library, I've been thinking about what to do with it. I'm restructuring. I'm turning the entire trust into a charitable foundation to fund shelters and libraries and nursing programs like the one Eleanor quit." His face tensed at her name, but he didn't flinch. He just listened. I need someone to help me, I said. Not a CEO, not a president. I need a director of operations, someone to read the grant proposals, someone to visit the sites, someone to haul the boxes of books and check the plumbing on the new women's shelter. It's work, Arthur, real work. It pays a salary, a fair one, but it's a job. It's not a kingdom. I let him stand there. I was offering him a way back, not to the top, but to the inside. He looked at me, and I saw the understanding in his eyes. He knew exactly what I was offering, a life of service, a life of purpose. Yes, he said, no hesitation. If you'll have me, I'll do it. I'll do whatever you need me to do. There's one more thing, I said, my voice firm. Two, really. He nodded. Anything. You have to tell Mark the whole truth, not the story we told him about downsizing. He is a good man, and he deserves to know who his parents are. Both of us. He swallowed, and I could see the terror that prospect held. But he nodded. You're right. I will. I'll ask him to come home this weekend. I'll tell him everything. And Eleanor? He flinched. What? What about her? You owe her an apology, I said. Not for loving her, you didn't. You owe her an apology for using her, for your vanity, for your weakness. She made terrible choices, but you encouraged them. You have to set that right, too. He was silent for a long moment. How? That's for you to figure out, I said. I turned and walked toward the kitchen. I'll make us some tea. You can put your suit away. He stood in the hall for a long time. Then I heard his footsteps, not going to his old study, but going up the stairs, to the bedroom, to our bedroom. Later that evening, I saw him at the dining room table. He was writing a letter. He had a checkbook open beside him, a new checkbook, one I had given him, tied to a new, modest bank account I'd opened in his name with his first week's salary from the foundation. He was making a different kind of amends, not with my money, but with his. The following Saturday, Mark came home. He walked in, cheerful, dropping his weekend bag by the door. Hey, it's good to be— Whoa! He stopped. He looked from me to his father. We were sitting in the formal living room, a room we rarely used, and the air was thick. Arthur was in his simple khaki trousers, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. Mom? Dad? What's going on? You look like someone died. I motioned to the sofa. Mark, sit down. Your father, we have something we need to tell you. It's the truth about the last year. Mark sat, his eyes filled with a new wariness. I told him about the GPS, about Eleanor. His face hardened, his eyes turning cold with a son's protective fury. He looked at Arthur, his mouth a thin line. Dad, is she serious? And Arthur, for the first time in his life, did not bluster. He did not defend. He did not make a single excuse. He looked his son in the eye and he told him everything. He spoke in a low, flat, shame-filled voice. He told him about the lies, the arrogance, the cruelty. He told him about the Reynolds account. He told him about the red sports car and the bracelet. He confessed it all, a tide of poison being drawn from a wound. And then he told him the second part, the secret. Your mother, she owned it all, Mark. All of it. The company, the house, the money I was spending, it was hers. I was a fool, a strutting, arrogant fool, playing king in her castle. I wasn't the man you thought I was. Mark sat back, stunned. He looked at me, his mind clearly racing, piecing it all together. The downsizing? The cottage? The library job? Yes, I said, and your father's job at the nursery. Mark stared at his father. He was seeing him, really seeing him, not as the invincible Arthur Vance, but as a man, a flawed, broken, real man. You? You let him? Mark asked me, his voice incredulous. You had all of that, and you let him? And you worked in the library? I had to, Mark, I said softly. The man your father had become, I didn't know him, and I didn't like him. I had to let that man be destroyed. I had to see if the man I married was still in there underneath all of it. Mark was silent for a long time. He stood up, he paced the room, and finally he stood in front of his father. Arthur looked up, his face braced for the judgment, for the anger, for the rejection. I am so disappointed in you, Dad, Mark said, his voice thick with emotion. For what you did to Mom, for Aunt Ellie, it's disgusting. Arthur flinched, but nodded, I know. But, Mark continued, the man who just told me that, the man who worked at a nursery for 8 months to figure himself out, I think I respect that man. I think that's the most honest you've ever been, with me and with yourself. He reached out his hand. We're not okay, not yet, but welcome back, Dad. Arthur looked at his son's hand, and then he took it. He didn't just shake it, he held on to it as if it were an anchor. And he wept. That was the moment his redemption truly began. He did write that letter to Eleanor. I saw him mail it at the post office. He told me he had enclosed a check, his first full salary from the foundation. It was, he'd said, the first money he'd ever truly earned in his life. He told her he was sorry, not for the affair, but for using her, for feeding his vanity with her life, for encouraging her to become a person he knew she wasn't. She never replied. Her cottage was sold a few months later. I heard she had moved to the West Coast, seeking a new start. I hope she found it. Arthur's amends were for him, not for her. He had to clean his side of the street. He did, and in doing so, he found a measure of peace. And our lives, they settled. The Blue Heron Foundation became our entire focus. It turned out that a man with Arthur's ambition and drive, when stripped of his ego, is a formidable force for good. He didn't just direct operations, he worked. I remember arriving at the site of a new youth center we were funding. It was a cold day in November, a year after his confession to Mark. I was there for the donor ceremony. Arthur was supposed to meet me. I couldn't find him. The donors were waiting. The mayor was tapping his watch. I finally found him in the basement, sleeves rolled up, arguing with a contractor. The load-bearing wall, he was saying, jabbing a finger at a blueprint, is not up to code. I don't care what the inspector said. I've run the numbers. If you put the HVAC unit on the roof above this, you're going to get shear in 5 years. You're going to fix it, and you're going to do it right, or the Blue Heron Foundation will pull its funding. The contractor, a large, gruff man, just nodded. Yes, sir, Mr. Vance. Arthur turned, saw me, and his face softened. Clara, sorry. This man was trying to cut corners. On a children's center? He wiped a smear of dust from his face. Is it time? It's time, I said. He rolled down his sleeves, put on his jacket, and walked upstairs. He gave a speech, not about money or power, but about responsibility, about second chances. We don't live as husband and wife, not in the way we used to. The fire of that betrayal burned away the marriage we had. But in its place, we built something new. We are partners. We are friends. We are two people who have seen the absolute worst in each other and have, somehow, found a way to build a shared, better future. He is kind. He is patient. He listens to me. He still calls me Clara, but the word in his mouth has a different weight. It's not the name of his drab wife. It's the name of his anchor, his partner, his conscience. He is, in the end, a good man. He just had to lose a kingdom to find it. And that, my dear, is the story of the proud husband who learned the meaning of humility. Did I do the right thing? Let me know what you would have done in the comments below. I have so many more stories to share. Please subscribe and join our family so you don't miss the next one. Until next time, this is Auntie Clara. Be good to one another.